doing Friday night. But if we kiss, it will not last. So, my friend, I ask you, please let 3 months pass. Oh, yes, I
Our guest today, Ben Florsheim, is 27 and is the youngest person ever elected to be mayor of Middletown. And after Mayor Aaron Stewart of New Britain, is only the second millennial elected to lead a Connecticut municipality. Today we'll talk about the future of Connecticut leadership and the issues our towns and cities will face in 2020. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or our member municipal leaders. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much for having me. It's very exciting.
All right. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, congratulations on the win. And while we were doing some research for today, we discovered that you wrote your senior thesis at Wesleyan University about a man in his late 20s running for mayor of a fictional Middleburg, Connecticut. What inspired you to bring this plot line out in the real world?
Well, it's funny. I mean, it's really a lot of people have. I think our superintendent of schools, upon hearing about the thesis, called me Nostradamus. And the irony, people can believe this or not. It really had the thesis was had really very little to do with my own future plans. At the time, I had worked in politics all through my time as a student at Wesleyan, and the thesis was really sort of an indulgence. I mean, it was more about portrayal of political campaigns and government on sort of scripted television shows like The West Wing and Scandal, and sort of what I saw as kind of a dissonance between what got portrayed on those types of shows and what the reality of it was actually like. So I wrote this sort of script, this pilot script of about a politician running for office, and it was really sort of drawn from campaigns I had worked on my own predecessor's campaign, Dan Drew, when he was first elected, and worked for at the time was not yet working for Chris Murphy, but went on to work for Senator Murphy's office for a number of years after graduation. And so I was just trying to sort of draw on those experiences.
And you think sharing the reality of what it's actually like rather than the Hollywood version might actually encourage more younger people to get involved?
That was sort of the hope. I think that the reason for that is it was I tried to sort of portray what I saw at the time, and certainly I have seen a lot more since and have a much different perspective on it now. But I sort of tried to portray the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And I think, and I said at one point in the paper, I remember, the West Wing portrayal of politics has been responsible for like more dropouts of the college Democrats group on any given campus than any other single factor, right? Because people get involved expecting one thing, and then they encounter something entirely different, something a lot probably more mundane than they might be anticipating. And so I wanted to, and
the reality actually it maybe attracts a slightly different crowd than the perception.
Indeed, right. And I think that my years since in politics have really reaffirmed the need to take more of an organizing approach. You have to go in with an organizer's mindset rather than, I guess, a policymaker's mindset if you want to be successful in this line of work. They're both important. They both serve the same goals in a lot of ways. But if you go in thinking, I'm going into this so that I can write speeches about foreign policy, you're going to be in for a rude awakening when you get asked to, the first thing you get asked to do walking into a campaign headquarters is, go sit in the corner and call voters and get yelled at all day.
The real world.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So you're the mayor of Middletown now. Did you come to Middletown through being a student, correct?
I did, yes.
You're not a native of Middletown.
I am not, no. So I grew up in the West, in the Midwest, and came here for to become a student at Wesleyan
and put down some roots.
Yeah, exactly. I had sort of I had moved around during my adolescence enough that I was kind of the place where I was going home for like break, and stuff like that was not the place that
you grew up
where I was from, and I think that part of the reason that I got as involved in Middletown as I did is I was trying to sort of establish like, okay, this is where I'm going to be for at least the next 4 years, and I want to make myself a home out of it, and you know,
and you did.
One thing led to another. So
in relation to that, the Hartford Courant recently in an op-ed, you discussed your optimism for the state of Connecticut as a transplant,
right?
And you said after a decade of pessimism, the case for pragmatic optimism was an easy one to make. Why is optimism easier for you as a transplant? You call it a superpower, and how do you get the pessimists among the natives to feel the same way, to be proud of our state?
I think that part of it is just it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Just I mean, I think the negativity has been a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I think the optimism can be a self-fulfilling prophecy too. I heard from a lot of people who are natives after I wrote that saying, "Thank you. It's good to finally hear somebody saying." Talking about the I didn't go into I didn't like I had to sort of make a conscious choice given the space that you get with an op-ed to not go in and say, all right, here's my list of things that I like about Connecticut, because I think that a lot of that people know what that is, and they can also kind of put their own spin on it when they read it. I just wanted to put it into people's minds that there are people who like living here, and that there are people who are excited about this place. And especially in places like Middletown that are growing, that are vibrant.
There's things happening.
There's things going on. There's there's young people coming in. There's people who are moving back to retire, that sort of thing. And I think that that as a transplant, but also I heard from people who had maybe grown up here and lived other places and come back. When you see the other side of it's the grass is always greener argument, right? I mean, it's like when you see the other side of the fence, you're like, oh, maybe it's not always greener. Maybe there's elements of what make us that are good, and even if we have challenges, even if we have problems, which we certainly do, and I know we're going to talk about them, then they become less sort of existential in nature, less kind of immutable in nature, and more just like, okay, we've got some challenges like everywhere does, and let's get together and figure out how we can solve them to save what's so good.
So one of the first things that you would have to contend with as a mayor is a budget,
right?
And many people don't know exactly how a town or city budget comes together. It's detailed, it's delicate. How's the process gone for you so far? Was it what you expected? Is there things that you discovered in this process that you didn't necessarily have on your radar before?
That's a good question. There haven't been any huge surprises yet. Although we'll see how long that keeps up. I just we just sort of sent out the directive to all of our city departments. So the way that it works is all the city departments get a copy of last year's budget. They're asked to come up with a proposal. I asked them to come up with a proposal for what they'd like to see in their current year budget. And then I use that to inform what I put forward in front of the council. And the council has the ability to come up with its own budget, and then we sort of reconcile all these different visions together. And one of the things, this was not a surprise, but something that gets reaffirmed once you're in there, once you're in the building, is just how lean government does have to run these days, and a big factor is what's going on at the state level. A big factor is the sort of way that we structure local government and how we collect revenue at the state and local level.
On the property tax,
exactly. And also, a lot of it is contractual. So much of a city's budget is already tied up in contracts with our employees. It's Middletown is one of the and this is a good thing in my view, just because it's been managed very responsibly. Middletown is one of the only communities in the country, frankly, in the state that has that still uses a municipal employee pension, and in fact has a well-funded municipal employee pension. I think it was ranked as the 11th strongest fund in the country. And then that combined with salaries and benefits and all that stuff. A lot of it is already set in stone. So
that's kind of great for you to have things that are already working in place, not having to
very much so
redo everything and concentrate more on other issues.
Right. And we're very lucky in that respect. We've had generations of really strong, smart financial leadership on our city council coming out of the mayor's office. We are the only community of our demographic with a AAA bond rating. We are like I said, we have an overfunded pension fund. We treat I think our employees well and rightfully so, because it's also been a smart financial decision. If we were to switch to if we were to move away from a defined benefit structure, it would probably end up costing us more. Just because at this point it's kind of funding itself. It's been we've invested very
everything's
smartly
going well,
right? And that's not to say that we don't have a cost of living problem, right? I think that that's the challenge all across Connecticut, is the fact that people are just, when it comes to the property tax, obviously is a huge part of it, but also energy costs, utility costs. It's
an expensive state to live in.
It's an expensive place to live, and I think that we have to figure out a way to sort of square that circle. For sure.
Talking about budgeting and funding and stuff, and property taxes. Middletown has university, has a hospital. Can you talk a little bit about
college, a lot of state buildings,
pilot program from the state, which is the payment in lieu of taxes, which is basically you have large institutions that aren't taxable, but serve the greater community,
and that is a challenge for Middletown. Certainly, it's a challenge. We're sitting now in the studio in New Haven. I know it's a challenge here, and in places like Hartford. We have it better than some, not as good as others in terms of the amount of non-taxable property that we have. Middletown is pretty geographically large, and we have big commercial corridors. We have industrial sections of town, so we have big pockets of our city is on the grand list, as they call
some
it.
diversification of stuff there.
Exactly, which is a good thing. And then, of course, just like in places like Hartford and New Haven, you've got those assets like Wesleyan University, like Middlesex Community College,
state
that
buildings
are bringing in that, like the state buildings to some extent too. They are bringing in a population that wouldn't otherwise be coming in, that contribute to the economic life of the city, that contribute to the tax base and so on and so forth. But we have also been chronically and historically underfunded by the pilot program, which I think is not
promised a certain amount through the formula, and then it's just not there.
It's not there because in the state, I mean, what's the state going to do? Like they say it's not there, and so
they can't print the money,
right? And I think we all of the cities and towns that encounter this problem are, we have to rely on our state delegation to sort of scrounge for it during.
I mean, when you're coming into this budget process, are you going to be counting on the number they say you should get, or are you going to pretend that that's not there and realizing that you may not get that money?
It's going to have to be. I mean, we're going to have to do it a couple different ways. I think. I mean, last year. The city just had to budget as all cities did. They just had to kind of assume that it wasn't coming, because they didn't know the budget was due and the state wasn't done with theirs, and so you just had to kind of play it by ear. We have a good delegation. We're lucky. We have people who know what they're doing up at the state capitol, and who do a good job of making sure that Middletown is made whole. And we'll be working very closely with them to make sure that we're in line with the predictions, that we're in line with the projections. But I think that we're also going to have to sort of create. I mean, I've asked department heads to say, cut where you can. Like, show me what flat would look like. Show me what 5% cut would look like. And there's very little way to do that in a lot of these departments. I was just meeting with
the budget's already tight.
It's already tight. And I was talking with our registrar of voters yesterday. She said 5% cut is going to be tough because we have another election coming up. We have a presidential primary coming up, and we need to bring on temporary staff for that. The town clerk's office needs to bring on temporary staff for something like that. And so it's challenging. So what we're gonna need to do is sort of prepare for the worst, but really work hard to get
plan for the best, prepare for the worst.
Yeah, exactly.
We are sitting here at WNHH in New Haven, and New Haven's new mayor, Justin Elliker, just released a list of recommended goals created by his transition team, some of which could be accomplished in 100 days and others in 2 years. Do you have a similar development plan for Middletown? And what are some of the goals that you have for 100 days, 2 years, 4 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was joking with Justin. I talked to him a couple weeks ago about how he had this like long leisurely transition period, and I took office the week after the election, and so it's a totally, of course, you
take office in November.
In November, yeah. Wow, so the election was November 5th. We took office on November 12th. And it's a quick transition, and so we didn't have like a transition team the way that he did. Of course, he has a totally different set of challenges. He has to hire all new staff, which we don't really do to the same extent in Middletown. So I know he was not. I know he didn't have his feet up during that period of time. But yeah, I mean, I think that these first 100 days, this first budget cycle, these are all critical things, and you want to set the tone the right way. Before we were here, we were actually a couple blocks away at SeeClickFix. Middletown is not a city that has used SeeClickFix in the past. We've explored it in the past, but never pulled the trigger. It's something that I talked about quite a bit on the campaign. One of the things I heard constantly out knocking doors was we feel like if there's something wrong, if there's a pothole, if there's a broken curb, if there's a sign that's fallen down, it's like going into a black hole. Some things get fixed, and some things don't, and that's partially a budget thing, that's partially a staffing thing, but it's also a communications thing.
Just
and
knowing and being everyone be able to see the same information.
Right, exactly. And people know that they're being at least heard, and they're hearing back about what the time frame is, what's why something hasn't been fixed yet, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's really that's something that we talked about a lot during the campaign. It's something that we want to bring to the city. It's one of the things that has been a priority for me to get done in the first few months, and we're hoping to have that happen. And that's really those are the sorts of things that we're trying to do. We're hosting community town hall meetings. We're trying to open up the processes in city government a little bit and make sure that people are. I did community outreach for Senator Murphy's office for 5 years. That was my job, was making sure that people had a line to our DC office, had a line to our casework staff in Connecticut. So when they had an issue, when an issue presented itself, they knew who to call. They knew where they could reach out to. And we're trying to bring some of that same spirit to City Hall, where I think it's even more important and even more achievable at the local level. That's really been the focus of my first sort of 100 days in office, is getting out there into the community as much as possible.
We'll get back to what's achievable in just a second, after I remind everyone that you are listening to WNHH LP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We are streaming live on TuneIn Radio and newhavenindependent.org. We are also streaming live on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/newhavenindependent. All right. So, going on a slightly larger scale, Nathan Robinson of Current Affairs asked about what was possible on the municipal level as a small city mayor. And responses included participatory budgeting, public banks, high-quality public toilets, community land trusts, things that are implemented or being looked at around the state. On the grandest scale, what do you think is possible for mayors and first selectmen to accomplish?
It's a great question, and I have that article bookmarked. And I think that it really we have to think big, and I think that part of the reason for that, and this was another reason for me to run, and it's something that's why municipal government was interesting to me even back in college. Why I wrote that paper, in part, is this is where things are happening, right? And after working for 5 years in the U.S. Senate, I love Chris Murphy. He's been an outstanding mentor, and I think he's a fantastic United States senator. And at the same time, and he would tell you this if you were sitting here, like you can only go into a staff meeting for so many weeks and hear, well, we're not doing anything again this week. We've just got a bunch of judges that we're confirming, and there's nothing else planned. Like, have a good week. Before you start to go a little bit crazy. You want to, you're in this line of work to get things done, to try to help people. And at the local level is where that's happening.
There's always something to get done on the local level.
Exactly. And even if it's, again, SeeClickFix, even if it's fixing a pothole, that's meaningful to people's lives. And then I think that there are also some of these bigger progressive priorities that we can start to tackle at the local level. I think participatory budgeting you mentioned we're gonna do as we go through this municipal budget. a sort of public budget workshop. We're going to work in a way that I think is kind of a new and unique thing with the Board of Education, rather than sort of, let them do their own thing. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to kind of slam into each other at the end of the cycle and sort of make it work.
So starting from a place
of, okay, here's about where we are. Here's about where we are. How can we make this work together? And then do that in front of the public too. Bring people in. And I know that there are state legislators who have done this. I got the idea from Representative Sean Scanlon, who I worked with in Senator Murphy's office, and I know has been on this program. I remember his first term as a state rep. He did a state budget workshop. Because everybody thinks, the state budget is a mess. Which in many ways is true. But here's why it's such a why can't these people get it together? Like
how it got to be such a mess, and all the little reasons why it is
exactly
complicated.
And here's where the cut. Here's where we've had to cut. Here's where we can't cut. And once people are brought into that process, they start to understand a little bit better what the challenges are on the municipal side. At the same time, we don't know what we don't know, right? And I think, and the public is going to have ideas that they can and should have proper avenues to contribute. And some of it may be workable, some of it may not. But giving people an opportunity to say, these are my budget priorities. I went to the last time, our last municipal budget, I went to the budget hearing because it was a big, it was the first sort of big increase for our education budget in a while, which was a good thing.
This was last year before
yes, exactly. So I went to the council meeting where it was going to be adopted. I expected there to be people there because it was one of the biggest increases we've had in quite some time. There were more council members there than there were members of the public, and that should tell you. I mean, you can interpret that a couple different ways. I think part of how you can interpret that is that people think that we're actually doing a pretty good job with the budget. Another one would be we're not communicating well enough about when these important city meetings are happening. Another way to interpret it is, why bother to show up? If my input isn't going to be heard, if this all happened behind closed doors, I didn't know about it. They don't care what I think. We want to go the extra mile to make sure that people know we do care what they think, and we want to hear them, and we want them to hear us. So I think that's definitely a direction we want to go in. I also think that there's a ton of work to be done on sustainability at the local level. I think that what is great about this idea and this framing of the Green New Deal is that it puts it in a context that people understand. It's not just sort of, it's not pie in the sky environmental stuff. It is how we get from A to B to C all the way to Z is local jobs. It's local employment. It's local projects. It's all. That's what the New Deal was, right? We have this. We have a WPA mural hanging in our senior center that is just incredible. It's this sort of it was a local artist who painted this sort of like this scene of Middletown funded by the WPA during the New Deal, and that's what was the beauty of that program, was that it was national funding for local projects. And we can't control the national funding side, but we can start talking about, and in some cases start doing some of what those local projects would be, knowing that we could be doing more of them with the proper funding and trying to make the case for more of that funding. Municipal solar is something that a lot of cities and towns in Connecticut have had a lot of success with. We were one of the partner cities for the Connecticut Green Bank's Solar for All program, trying to help get solar panels made accessible for people who can't afford to have the installation on the front end. You use the energy savings on the back end to pay back the installation costs, that sort of thing. And doing installations of that type, I think there's tons of opportunity there.
I know. I saw you were at our convention in December. And Middletown was participating, I believe, in the Sustainable CT program. Right. And silver certificate?
We're one of the only silver cities. And so the work is already being done. And I think that there's just we have a great clean energy sort of plan in place. It's just a matter of implementing it, and a lot of that can be done through partnerships with places like Wesleyan, with private sector partners at the local level, and really try to lay the groundwork for what is achievable, what's possible on a statewide and national scale. If we get our act together, I think that the cities and towns have to be the to be the entities that are leading the way on this, and Middletown is a city that wants to lead the way on this. We want to be out in front on issues like this.
Yeah, we're not going to have to drag you to it. You're
exactly
ready to go.
We're here.
David Lehman, the commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development, gave a short presentation at one of our recent CCM meetings, which you were there.
Yep.
And he talked about greater regionalization, saying we're going to succeed as a team. Regionalization? What do you think on that?
I think that it's a question of. I don't think it's an if question. I think it's a when question and a how question. I think that we this is frankly one of the things that I think about when I think about comparing Connecticut to other places that I have lived and that
as someone coming from the outside,
right. The fact that we leave all of our cities and towns to their own fate and rely on this property tax infrastructure
169 of them,
is really what drives so much of our cost of living crisis. And I campaigned on that, which was kind of I didn't expect to, and I think for a long time it's been sort of treated as this third rail of Connecticut politics. So you don't talk about sharing services, you don't talk about regionalization, you don't talk about any type of structure where there's going to be where Middletown's fate is going to be tied to Middlefield's or Durham's or Haddam's or vice versa. But at the same time, a lot of the things that we're doing well right now are happening through cooperation. That's the reason. That's what CCM is all about. That's what the COG structure, the Council of Government structure, is all about. And I just think that if people are unhappy with the status quo, then we have to look at what that status quo looks like and how we can improve it. And so I think just like with the sustainability issue that I was just mentioning. Think about this in terms of fiscal and economic sustainability. This is something that is going to be led not by the state, but by the cities and towns. And I think that it's great that Commissioner Lehman, and I think that broadly Governor Lamont and most of his administration is on board with this notion. Is favorable to the idea that we're going to need to sort of just change the way that we structure some of these things. But I think that the state is going to struggle to have credibility on a lot of it. I think we saw that with the sort of I guess I'll say botched rollout of the school regionalization bills that took place this last year. At the same time, I think that when towns themselves work
if it comes from the bottom
when
up,
it comes
it's more
from the
likely
people, when it comes from the local level, and the case is being made by people who are a little bit closer to what's going on and can speak with a little bit more credibility to why this is actually helpful to everyone,
your community.
Then you make progress, and I'm excited that there's an opportunity to partner with the state on that. I just think that a lot of the ideas and a lot of the groundwork, a lot of the legwork is going to have to happen at the local level.
Because I know last year Senator Looney was talking about it earlier in the year, and then people got all worked up thinking, you're going to close all our schools and that kind of stuff. So what are some real world kind of practical examples that spring to mind of places where you would look to maybe regionalize?
I think that you start where the need is greatest and where the inefficiency is greatest. We have, and you look at different maps. You look at a map of all the health departments in Connecticut. It looks one way. Some of them are regional, some of them are two towns, some of them are single towns. Then you overlay a map on top of that has all of our emergency response districts, and it's like totally different. You overlay another one that's COGS, and you overlay another one that's congressional. I mean, it's
layer
all
upon
over
layer.
the place. And it's hard to sort of pick a place to start, but I think that one particularly important one is is emergency response. So we already share our 911 call center with Portland across the river from us.
Makes sense.
And then there's another shared one a couple towns over. I think I think Hampton and Glastonbury share.
Yeah.
But they're again, these are like
and
random
they're just sharing the
partnerships.
call center. It's you pick up a phone, you call somewhere, and it doesn't really matter where. It's not the ambulances themselves or the services. It's just the communications.
Right.
The phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just and how it's managed.
Mhm.
And I think that this was Rick Dunn, who's the head of the Naugatuck Valley COG, which is not my COG, but I worked with them when I was in Murphy's office.
Yep.
I remember would always give this as his example, that Connecticut has a smaller population than Orange County, California. We have something like 100 and some odd, over 100 911 districts.
Yeah.
And Orange County has one.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of running these things effectively. And so that would be one. We already have
That's kind
a
of
shared
an
one.
easy low hanging fruit.
And we should be talking with Cromwell. We should be talking with Meriden. We should be talking with and the challenge there. And there's always I mean the logistical implementation is always going to be the challenge. The contracts don't line up. And so how do you move forward with something like this without breaking a contract? I mean, that's the type of thing that needs to be.
Do you see maybe the state's role not so much as telling you what to do, but maybe legislating in ways that would make it easier for towns to do what they want to do?
I think that's broadly what we're gonna want to see.
Giving them a framework to do their thing within.
Right. Exactly. And that's gonna be so case by case. And I know that Ansonia and Derby right now are looking at merging their school districts, and that I think took a special act of the legislature to allow that to move forward. There were the state had to sign off on it
to clear some
way,
obstacles.
shape, or form. And that's really going to have to be that's going to be happening. And I think that the fact that we have legislators who have I have one of our state senators, Matt Lesser, has sort of it's Middletown up to Newington, so it has Cromwell, Rocky Hill, Newington, Weathersfield. So that's one, sort of region.
Yeah.
Our other state senator, Mary Abrams, has part of Middletown, then has Cheshire, Meriden, and Middlefield. And so, those districts, the way that those districts are drawn, also give us an opportunity to, I call up Matt and say, hey, we're trying to work with Cromwell on something.
Yeah.
Can you help us, get the proper approvals at the state level? I think
great.
that helps him make the case in both of his towns as well.
And have you found both of them to be receptive and open and excited to work with you?
Yeah, they're great. We have a really great delegation. And we have a couple new we have a couple new folks. We have a couple of folks who have been there for a long time. And that's just such an advantage to have a state delegation who knows what they're doing, is on the same page with a lot of our priorities. I haven't had extensive sort of shared services conversations with them yet. But we have, first couple of weeks I was up at DOT with the full delegation talking about the future of Route 9 and the sort of state's plans for that and how that's going to affect the city, that sort of thing.
What would you like to see happen with Route 9?
Well, I mean, it's the most difficult Rubik's Cube that we have to solve. The state really is invested in getting those traffic lights that I think everybody from outside of Middletown hates.
Has ever gone through Middletown and on Route 9 has seen that weird intersection and been like, why is this highway?
Why is there
right on these local roads with this little?
Exactly. And the reason, I mean, the history there is it was a local road that got a highway sort of grafted
designation,
onto it, over the years, and was built into this major sort of state route. Over time, off of this little stretch, this local road that went from Middletown to Cromwell. So the lights actually were it was not the lights that followed the highway. The highway followed the lights.
The lights were there before.
The lights were there first. But the real challenge is solving the traffic problem. And which is sometimes, I mean, traffic is a sort of a fact of life in a lot of places, and you want to mitigate it as much as you can. You want to certainly mitigate crashes. And one of our on ramps, I think, has the most accidents, most crashes of any intersection.
Having experienced them, I'm not surprised.
And so that needs to be addressed. What we have to be careful about is there's a number of things that we have to be careful about. One is building a transportation plan that is all about cars, right? And focusing exclusively on passenger vehicles, focusing exclusively on highway transit, especially in a place like Middletown, I think is a risky strategy.
Yeah.
A lot of the and you know, it's an engineering problem too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a traffic engineer,
Yeah.
right? But I can see from where I sit that a plan that gets rid of those lights is going to have to involve something, a different way of getting people on and off the highway in downtown Middletown. That's a lot easier said than done. And it's hard to do it without putting an enormous amount of traffic onto local roads and onto our main street, which really a lot of the main street's advantages is that it is kind of a pedestrian friendly, you know, very wide, very walkable, you know, it's all retail and restaurants on the first floors. So it's people coming in and out, turning that into a
main route.
Right. Is a, we're not convinced that is the right, that's the right strategy.
Is there any talk when you're thinking about those plans of somehow better connecting the downtown to the harbor area?
And that's
across,
the other side of it.
It's
right. And that's
separated.
So it's all connected. So riverfront redevelopment is a huge priority for us. It's been something that's been talked about in Middletown for a long, long time. There were a lot of infrastructural challenges that have been overcome. We had a water treatment plant. Our sewage treatment plant was down there, and that is just now in the process of being decommissioned. Glastonbury
had a similar issue with a tank farm, and turned into they have a boathouse there now where weddings are hosted. It's gorgeous.
Right. And so there's tons of opportunity at the river now that that plant is coming offline. But Route 9 is just this sort of X factor, and it's hard to plan for the river without knowing what we're going to do about the road, and vice versa. So that's one of these areas where we're going to have you know, sort of ongoing, robust conversations. And we've talked with DOT about it. We've also talked with the ECD about it. We had Commissioner Lehman come down. We wanted to get this on his radar because we think it's an important part of it's an important regional asset as well. It's an important statewide asset as well. And we want to make sure that it's not the tail wagging the dog. We want to make sure that the long-term project, the project that's going to serve the community and serve the region over the long term, which is getting the riverfront right, isn't something that serves the needs of a highway. We have to get that. We have to make sure that we're doing the correct order of operations there. Right. Yeah.
Circle back around to the start of the show.
Sure.
With all of these challenges and goals, what does the optimist outlook look like for Connecticut in 2020?
I think that it looks like it looks like a place that is more focused on the assets that we have. And I know, and I referenced this in the piece. I think that goes so far beyond being between Boston and New York. That's part of it, right? It's part of it, but it's not all of it. And we have vibrant, small to medium-sized cities like Middletown and New Haven that I really do think are going to be our future. I think that's the type of place where people want to live these days. People want to live in places that have things like a thriving riverfront. They want access to recreational spaces. They want relatively affordable cost of living, which is again continues to be a huge challenge in Connecticut, but it's nothing compared to New York and Boston, and so it's something that we need to stay laser focused on that cost equation. But more and more people are not wanting to live in those places because they're being literally priced out. I think that one of the tremendous assets that we have, setting aside Boston and New York, just the fact that we have such great proximity to so many things, even within the borders of the state. You can be in the mountains in the morning, you can be on the beach by the afternoon. It's just not something you get in some of the places where I've lived in the past.
You can be 8 hours from the next thing,
from one thing to the next. And the fact that we have this incredible combination of recreational assets, of cultural assets, the universities that we have are obviously a huge draw. The fact that we have these sort of the great thing about 169 towns is that all of these towns have such unique cultures to them. They have history. There's history to everything, and that we celebrate that history, and that we integrate that history into everything that we're doing moving forward. And I think that that's just something that a lot of places can't claim. And I think
we're
that
we are lucky in that we can look back to our history as a state and see that we were a state of inventors and innovators,
right,
and still are,
and looking at what other states are doing, we can see what advantages we have, and we can also see where we can improve, where we can be. I saw it was mentioned to me the other day that over the past, I can't remember the time frame, but over the past few years, the apartment market, the rental market in Middletown has gone up 40%.
Okay,
and the single family housing market has been flat. There's a lesson there, and it's pretty clear what it is. Is that's what people are looking for when it comes to housing now, and that's not how we've structured housing policy anywhere in the state of Connecticut.
It's all
with a few
towards
exceptions,
single family,
exactly, for a long time. But here we are in Middletown with this thriving downtown that people love to visit. Okay, well, what can we do to make it also a better place to live? What can we do to bring in new housing and also fix up the housing that we have, and make sure that we look at other cities and towns, other states that have experienced a housing boom that has also priced people out. How do we avoid that? How do we make sure that we're doing this in the right and responsible way? There's just so much opportunity there, and if you can't, and if you look at it, if you just look at it for what it is, you can't help but be optimistic about it. I mean, that's what I found when I talked about it with people on the campaign trail.
Excellent. And one last question. You just mentioned doing some of the things to help bring people in. It's 2020. Every 10 years in this country, we have the U.S. Census.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit what you see, what your town's doing for census efforts? You have a complete count committee, I know, that you just formed. And how important is it for towns and cities to get everyone counted?
It's really important. And we're lucky that we have the person who is leading up this initiative at the statewide level happens to be a Middletown resident and native, Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysowitz. And she's leading the statewide complete count committee and has been encouraging towns and cities to form their own local complete count committee. So she reached out to me, days after the election and said, Middletown doesn't have one of these. You should really have one. And so we put that process into motion. What it really looks like is making sure that we have all of our community institutions, our churches, our hospital, community health center, the universities, the Chamber of Commerce. We have the largest chamber in the state is based in Middletown. Just the organizations and people who know where the other organizations and people are, to get everybody counted, even the people who are hard to count, which is non-English speaking populations, people who,
homeless,
seniors are increasingly, it's increasingly a challenge to, and there's so many ways that you can now complete the census and respond to the census.
You can do it online this time.
You can do it online this time. You can do it by mail, and the idea is we want to get as many people to do that on the front end as possible to know about it, so that nobody has to come knocking on their door a few months down the line. The reason that it's important is funding. And representation, frankly. So it determines federal funding. It determines how the state disperses funding that it receives. Every other survey, every other population-based survey, every other population-based question is based on the census. And if you get bad data in, you get bad data coming out. And so we don't want to shortchange ourselves when it comes to those crucial funding opportunities. By not having an accurate representation of our population, and we also want to make sure that we get the appropriate representation. It also factors into how we apportion congressional seats, Senate seats,
districts within the state.
Right, exactly. So the state legislative seats, and we want to make sure that we have the representation that we are owed by our population, that we deserve based on our population. So that's why it's important. It's really about making sure that we're getting back what we need as a community.
Great. I'd like to thank our guest, Mayor Florsheim. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer. Christopher Gilson is our producer. Harry Draws on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM Chat series on our YouTube page. Just search for CCM Chats, and you'll find them all in one convenient playlist.